Hip popping should literally never happen. And in this video, I'm going to break down how to completely solve it, how I solved it. And I got an exercise ball and a tennis ball. And I got a wall. Okay, so anybody watching this can start doing these exercises, movements, thinking about getting completely out of this hip popping, cracking pain. All things that I dealt with as a Division I college football player for a very long time. The biggest thing that I can start with is that too much of this and too much of this or this or this causes all of it. What do I mean by that? Is too much compressing the spine, standing like this, creating the low back to almost be in pain and compressed and squeezed, which is just creating tightness in the hip socket, which is not allowing the hip to move in every single direction, fully just functional as you should as a human. And this, the second that I started doing hinging, being comfortable in a deeper squat, and we're gonna break down from beginner to advanced in this video, but these movements, the second that you kind of reverse this approach and get to this approach, the hip popping should completely go away. So first thing we're gonna start with, and you may not expect this, but we're gonna take the shoes off, we're gonna take the socks off. Very, very simple. We're gonna hop on a tennis ball. These are called foot fascial adhesion rolls. And what we're doing is simply rolling out the bottom fascia, the plantar fascia, if you've ever heard of it, of the foot. Okay, so I'm going over, if you look at my hand right now, this is my foot. And I'm trying to find any area in here that potentially has disruptions. Okay, and it's not necessarily rolling out muscle, but it's rolling out fascia, which is the web-like material that runs through the entire chain of the body that starts with the foot. And usually with people that have a more pronated foot, that causes the knee to go in, that causes the hip to pinch, that causes popping. So this is how we slowly are able to resolve it. And it starts with a simple tennis ball roll, right? This is gonna allow for blood flow up the chain of the body. Is this gonna solve everything? Absolutely not. I'm not your PT giving you a freaking lacrosse ball and telling you good luck. That's not my goal. We're getting blood flow. That's about it. If you find a vulnerable area or a tender spot, I like to tell people to go down and press and take a deep breath into that tender area and feel that release. If you've ever heard of myofascial release, that's what it is, okay? And the next step that we're gonna get into is called a hip hinge hold. Very simple movement. All you're gonna need is the wall, okay? And I want everybody in this video, whether you're a grandma, whether you're 10 years old, whether you're an elite level athlete, to be able to do this with me. So the concept that we want to think about before I even get into it is a strong arch in the foot. Why a strong arch? Not a high arch, but a strong arch. Why am I talking about the foot? Well, the foot leads up the chain to the knee, to the hip. Once we have this in sort of a balanced alignment between sides, the body is able to function. My low back has this mobility, and I don't have this restriction in my hip like I previously did. So what we're going to focus on with this hip hinge hold, okay, is bringing the toes in, the knees out. So if you see me clearly, toes in, knees out. And we're going to talk about this concept called the floating heel, which basically is like your heel is not up high, it's not a calf raise, it's floating right there. And all you're doing is engaging your transverse arch. I'll put a picture of it right here of what it looks like on screen. The biggest thing that you want to focus on is pressuring the ball of your foot into the ground as much as you can as you're getting your knees wide. Now I have this here. You can use a wall, you can use a bar, whatever you need to be able to have assistance with it. But your feet are basically shoulder width apart, okay, as you're doing this. The key thing that you want to think about is, again, I'm about 1.5 feet off the wall, toes in, knees out, knees wide. And I want to bring my butt up the wall. And I'm engaging my feet, and I want to keep my back flat. You're already going to feel tension in your low back. If you can't handle that and you want to go here, even better. and this is easier, and this is easier. But all we're doing right now is trying to unlock the hip socket out of its place. Now, how you can regress this is literally just putting more of your weight on here, or even assisting yourself on the wall and sinking your hips back and holding that position actively. It's a very simple idea. How do we progress with this, and how do we feel out if you're an athlete watching? How do we address this like long term? We basically are active with our feet, pressuring into the floor, wide knees, and I want to feel my hamstring stretch, and I want to balance out my pelvis. So we've noticed with a lot of people that do this, is basically chest is high, right? They get into this movement, and then I tell them to bring their knees wide. There's a foot that's weaker. There's an arch that's weaker, and that stems to a hamstring tightness on one side. The pelvis is pushed down. For me, that was my left side. So how you can balance that out is you're in this movement, and you're getting the knees wide, and you're bringing the butt higher up the wall, and the knees are wider. You're engaging your arches into the ground. Your chest is high, and you're going to start to feel that sort of unalignment. And I want you to think about balancing the pelvis. And just doing this movement alone is going to relieve you of a lot of the potential hip tightness that you may have, especially when you keep these knees out and you're being really active and you're thinking about your pelvis realigning. You could also just work here in this stance and just thinking about that pelvis realigning, kind of thinking about the coil twisting movement, okay? So that's the first movement. Now, what do you do it for? You do it for as long as you want. A minute, 2 minutes, pulsing up and down, finding where your weak points are, finding your pelvis. Okay, we're not going for sets and reps. We got to address your pain. We got to address the hip popping. The next movement, and this is pretty much the last movement of the video, foot adhesion roll, hip hinge hold, and then here. We're on a ball, we're on a bench, we're on a chair, whatever you have, doesn't matter. A couch, desk, doesn't matter, okay? The key thing is, I'm going to think about that concept. Toe in, knee out, floating heel, engage the arches of the foot. I'm going to use this for assistance. What I'm going to think about is getting into a deep squat with those principles. So my chest is high, my toes are in, my knees are out, and my back is flat. Then I'm going to use the object that I'm holding to extend my legs up, still thinking toes in, knees out, and the floating heel. And I want to lock out my legs, and I'm going to feel a hamstring stretch like I've never felt before that goes all the way down. And you're going to feel this as well, all the way down to your foot. And you're kind of going to feel this pelvis sort of balance out. We see a lot of people that have a little bit of shaking with this. And I still want to think about not completely relaxing my back, but still keeping it slightly active. It's okay if it rounds a little bit. And then you're controlling back down to the bottom. Still toes in, knees out, floating heel, chest is high. And I'm controlling back up again to the top. Super slow, stay active with it. Find that weak point, find that side that has a weaker arch, that has more of a flat foot. You want to focus there. Extend that leg, and you can work this for a minute to 2 minutes to 20, 30 seconds, whatever feels comfortable for you. And if you have to go to a higher height with your hands, that'll be even easier. If you can't get down into a deep squat, then you go down to the point where you can handle and then come back up, okay? So this is completely scalable for anybody watching this, but these movements alone, I believe, and from my experience, and from working with a ton of the top level athletes and complete beginners, guys who've come off of strokes, that have sciatica and these hip popping or whatever, have seen relief with all three, okay? So try this out. Let me know if you see improvement. Leave some comments if you don't, and if you do, stay locked in.